President Biden's remarks from earlier at the State Department. He made a number of announcements on what his foreign policy will look like for the next 4 years. We also got some news there that he made aware that he wants to get the United States and diminish its role out of the Yemeni civil war, which obviously Saudi Arabia is a key player in as well. Right now, we're going to be joined by former national security official Elliot Abrams. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He also served as a deputy national security advisor for George W. Bush, President George W. Bush, and was a special representative for Iran and Venezuela in the Trump administration. Mr. Abrams, thank you so much for joining us here on News Now from Fox tonight. We wanted to get your reaction as well about President Biden's speech today at the State Department. What did you make of it?
Well, there were some parts of it that I liked. I don't think I'd say I liked the part dealing with Yemen too much. You know, it was a kind of a rah-rah speech cheering the State Department. I don't really know that it was necessary to do that, but you know, most presidents do that. I remember President Obama went over to the State Department very, very early in his term. So there was some news, and the news was partly about Yemen.
And for those viewers who are watching, can you explain to them, you know, how closely involved have we been in Yemen in the recent past, and what is the nature of our role there right now? What do we provide?
Well, there's two things going on. One, there is the question of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, straight counterterrorism role for the United States and our partners in the region. There's also a civil war going on in Yemen. And you have Iran backing one side, the Houthis, who control most of the country today. And you have some of our allies and partners, the Emirates and primarily Saudi Arabia, backing what used to be the government of Yemen and is now in exile. And what President Biden said today was that we are no longer going to back the Saudis in their efforts in Yemen, at least in offensive activities, he said. So that's a step back. Actually, President Trump had already taken one step back from backing the Saudis. This is a larger step back. I think the question, though, is since Iran is backing the other side, the Houthis, the mere fact that we're pulling back doesn't necessarily lead to peace.
This will no doubt alienate the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, will it not?
Yes, they saw it coming, I'm sure. During the campaign, then candidate Biden said he'd pull us back from backing the Saudis in Yemen. So no surprises here. But we're also reviewing, the United States is reviewing some of the arms sales to the region. So the Saudis have got to be feeling a little bit like orphans now. You know, if we want a negotiation to resolve the war and the terrible humanitarian situation in Yemen, what we've done now is probably make it a little bit harder, because the Houthis look at this and they say, okay, the Americans are walking away from the Saudis. Why should we negotiate?
I see. What did you make of Joe Biden's remark today that he said America is back? Well, we see this kind of, you know, I guess not renaissance, but reemergence on the world stage. As you know, the Trump administration, of which you worked, was somewhat recalcitrant in the 4 years that he was in office. So, you know, restoring kind of some of the relationships with our allies and the like. What do you make of that comment?
Pardon me. I think he overdid it. There's something there. I think our allies, and for that matter, our opponents, saw in President Trump someone who was unpredictable. Sometimes he'd have a great meeting, sometimes he'd have a terrible meeting. Policies would change in a tweet. That was very unsettling for everyone, but particularly our friends. So they all liked the fact that this may be a bit more predictable. But what Biden was doing today was also setting up a gigantic straw man, which was, you know, for 4 years, we had no diplomacy, none. So now we're going to have some diplomacy. And that really is just ridiculous. We cooperated with many allies, particularly European allies, on all sorts of things all over the globe. We had great cooperation with allies and partners who are near and worried about China, you know, from Australia to Japan to South Korea to Singapore. I mean, one could go on. So I think he just overdid it. And, you know, I guess what I'd say is the campaign's over. So tone it down a bit.
And new Secretary of State Tony Blinken was obviously flanking him during that speech today. What kind of job does he have in store? As you know, a lot of criticism was leveled at former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo of kind of hollowing out the State Department. The diplomatic corps largely was, viewed him very unfavorably. So what kind of job does he have in front of him at the moment, Tony Blinken?
Well, the critical thing, you know, is how much clout does he have? Most secretaries of state are popular the day they arrive. The question really is, are you popular 2 years or 3 years later? And one of the critical questions there is, do you really have clout? It turned out, for example, that John Kerry did not have a lot of clout with Barack Obama. And that hurts the morale in the building. If Tony Blinken really is extremely close to President Biden, if it means that when you do your work at the State Department, you know that everything you're doing really matters and is going to affect policy, and the secretary will carry it right to the president, that's going to be very good for morale. I think the press stories about how terrible morale was under Secretary Pompeo were not true. But it is true, I think, that most Foreign Service officers almost certainly voted enthusiastically for Joe Biden. And I think they were happy to see Tony Blinken, who'd been a deputy secretary and knows the building very well. So if he really has influence with the president, then morale will stay high.
And just lastly, let's go back to the situation in Yemen and your expertise there in the Middle East. For those Americans who haven't been following this terrible humanitarian crisis, what is it like on the ground there in Yemen, this protracted conflict? And kind of maybe just highlight again what our role has really been in assisting the Saudis in this kind of proxy war right now.
Well, the Saudis are being attacked from Yemen. That's something that I think a lot of Americans don't realize. Mm-hmm. Rockets, missiles are shot from Yemen right into Saudi Arabia and right at the Saudi capital. They hit a Saudi palace some months ago. They keep doing this. And the Houthis, what used to be a rebel group now in control of most of the country, recently bombed one of the airports in their own country. The humanitarian situation is one of the worst in the world. In terms of food shortages, water shortages, the health system, it's really terrible. And the fighting makes it very, very difficult for people who want to help, including the United States, to be able to do so. And that's one of the things the United States has been trying to do under President Obama, President Trump, now President Biden. I'm sure we will be trying to do that. And we've been trying to get a negotiation that would end the war. I'm just not sure that pulling back from one side, if Iran won't pull back from the other side, is going to make it easier to get that negotiation to the finish line.
All right, Elliot Abrams, the senior fellow for the Council on Foreign Relations, joining us here on NewsNOW from Fox. As you know, Mr. Abrams, we are a news stream, so we have lots of times to delve into the issue. Is there anything you might want to add? Final thoughts?
Well, final thoughts. I remember what happened in the Ukraine under President Obama. He refused to give arms to Ukraine when they were attacked by Russia. It didn't end the conflict. It certainly didn't help Ukraine. It may have made him feel better about not being more deeply involved in the conflict. That's a little bit what I worry about here. I think what we should have said to the Saudis was, look, over a period of a few months here, we're going to stop supporting offensive actions. So you'd better get into a negotiation as quickly as you can and see if you can make it work, rather than doing it this way. I think the problem now is that in Tehran and among the Houthis, they may be saying, well, let's just keep it going and wait for the Americans to finish up walking away fully. I'd say one other thing, and that is that I think around the Gulf today, nations whose security is tied closely to ours must be sitting there, thinking, well, how far is this going to go? And how far can we count on the Americans? So I hope that behind the scenes, there were long conversations between Biden administration officials and Saudi officials in which we explained what it is that we were about to do and said to them, we want to continue to work with you on your security and to get to a successful negotiation in Yemen. Because again, they're being attacked every week out of Yemen. For them, it's a very serious security problem.
All right, final words there from Elliot Abrams. We'll hopefully talk to you again as the Biden foreign policy comes into view. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Happy to do it.
All right, and before we go to commercial break, we just want to preview what we're going to be showing you for the next couple of hours here on NewsNOW from Fox. We are going to go back out to the House floor. Remember, we were previewing that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was at the lectern recounting what she went through on January 6th, the day of the Capitol riot. So we're going to bring that to you as well. But first, we'll see you back here in 2 minutes after the break.